KMMU.org. You're listening to Main Street Media Utah Radio, which also has video. This is the Liberty Mom Show. I am your host, Dalane, Englane. I'm very excited to have you join us today because we have a couple of amazing guests. We do have the Liberty Mom, Marianne Christensen, that will be joining us in a while. And she is the chair or the executive director of Utah Ledge Watch. But first of all, we have a Liberty Dad, which I am so thrilled to have on again. We ran out of time last week, so I'm really happy that you could take time to be with us. Austin Hepworth is an attorney. He's licensed in both Utah and California, and he is, full disclosure, he is running on an independent for the Utah Attorney General seat. And he has worked for many years in the area of law, even though he looks like he's a kid, he's not, including constitutional law, business, tax, estate planning, civil litigation. He has a deep love and appreciation for America and the truths that made this country what it is today, such a great nation. And he's authored many legal briefs at every level of the federal courts and the Utah courts. And he has helped to draft legislation for many laws in the state of Utah, which is where I first met Austin. He graduated summa cum laude at first in his law school and undergraduate class, and he graduated as valedictorian of his high school. And he was homeschooled for grades 3 through 9th, which is maybe one reason he's absolutely so brilliant. He served his mission in Taiwan for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he learned Mandarin Chinese, and he runs his own law firm. And he does work tirelessly to help others believe in America and help these constitutional principles, pro-family, pro the Constitution. And most importantly, he is the father of 8 children. And he is absolutely so principled. And I have so much admiration for Austin, and I'm thrilled. Welcome, Austin. Thank you so much for taking time of your very busy day to be with us again. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to be here with you.
Thank you. So we are going to discuss constitutional amendments A, B, C, and D. And I wanted to have Austin on because I find that Austin's brilliant. He's a really great thinker. He's very smart. And I rarely disagree with him, but we do have kind of conflicting perspectives on Amendment A and D. Now, first of all, I want everyone to know that A and D will be on your ballot, or if you have your ballot, you've already seen they're there. But because of the judges have ruled that the legislature did not give proper notice to the citizens, us, before putting them on the ballot. So they'll tally them up. They won't be counted. So they will not go into effect if they pass. But I still suggest that you vote for them however you vote for or against, vote on them, because that gives some perspective and some information to those who are writing these amendments. And it just kind of helps us know where people are. But we're going to discuss, like I said, kind of both sides of that. So we're representing both sides of those, all 4 of those amendments. We're going to start with Amendment 1. So Amendment 1, do you want to present that? Austin, do you want to present what that does?
Sure. And just to be clear, when you're looking at your ballot, we're talking about Amendment A. So it's the first one on there.
The first one, Constitutional Amendment A.
Yeah. So this is the description that will be on your ballot. It says, shall the Utah Constitution be amended to allow income tax money to be used for all state needs and prioritize public education funding for changes in enrollment and inflation? If this amendment is approved, state statute will eliminate the state sales tax on food. So there's actually 3 things it talks about in here. It talks about allowing income tax money to be used for all state needs, prioritizing public education funding for changes in enrollment and inflation, and eliminating the state sales tax on food. And so the reason that this is a thing, Utah is basically the only state that has this issue, you could say.
Yes,
a long time ago in Utah, voters elected to make it part of our Constitution that all income tax funds collected had to be used for education. So it's been that way for quite a while. The legislature's never loved that, but they've dealt with it over the years. And recently, they've tried a couple times to get this amended to say, hey, let us just use income tax like all the other states. And they ventured a little bit forward with this after sales tax on service. They said, okay, you may not give it all to us right now, but at least let us use it on programs for children and the disabled. So we open it up a little bit where it's not just education anymore. Now they can use it on programs for children and the disabled as well. So the income tax funds support 3 things currently in the state. But the legislature says, hey, look, guys, it's time to let us have full access to the funds. And one of the important things to know is that all government programs that are being funded, roads, police, any other things besides education, are coming through other taxes, whether it's property taxes, sales tax, liquor tax, different things like that. And even your property tax, even though all of your income tax funds, or virtually all of them, go to education, you have still a significant portion coming from your property taxes that go to education as well.
Most of your property tax pays for education as well. 100% of income tax pays for education. And about 70 to 75%, depending on your county, also pays for education of your property tax.
Yeah, so and so again, it's to understand that the government gets its money one way or the other. And
Yes.
so then some people ask the question, so then why do they care? Why are they trying to pass this amendment? And I think this is where, Dalane, you and I have some slightly different views. I think, as you listen, what we're discussing, one way I like to frame what we're discussing is that we're both trying to, you could say prophesy in a sense. We're both trying to predict the future as to which way brings about a better result. Now, I think, again, Dalane and I agree on the goals to try and achieve. We just don't see, we see different future paths. And so I would take my future path with a grain of salt because I'm not a prophet and I don't know the future. But I have to act on, what I can believe in. So as we discuss it, keep that in mind as you're listening. And again, we'd love also if you want to join in the conversation or anything, I think, Dalane, people can do that. But
we're going to lay the groundwork and then we're going to open it up to callers. And I will give the phone
Okay.
number and then people could call in and give their 2 cents and ask any questions if we're not clarifying things.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll just jump in, I guess, quick and share.
Yeah,
one
go
of the
ahead.
ways
And
I
then
see
I'll
things.
say, yeah, great.
So on Amendment A, when the legislature wants the ability to free up the boundaries around income tax and spend on whatever they want, I see things, my mind goes to, well, we'll have more hockey stadiums, more Major League Baseball stadiums, and whatever program the government wants to spend money on, they'll have a lot more access to funds. Because the thing about the income tax pool is that with a slight percent increase, you can collect a whole lot of money across the state to do things. And so I view it as I get concerned about all the government programs that are coming out, all the ways they like to spend money, the things they're pushing to spend it on. And to give a little bit of discussion quickly where it says to prioritize education, the government passed a statute that says, okay, if you pass this amendment, we agree that we're going to continue funding education at the same level for the next 10 years. So they're committing to not, cut funding to education, which means one of 2 things. If they want more funds from this to spend on other things, they'll either have to raise taxes or get money to education from another source. So they passed Amendment B. This is to tie in Amendment B, or they proposed Amendment B, which says, okay, we'll take some more money from the billions of dollars we have sitting over here, put it to education, and that will allow us to free up some money to spend on other things. But during the sales tax on service debates in 2019, one of the reps that sponsored it said, every year I get $700 to $800 million in budget allocation spending requests, and we just can't fulfill them for people. And at the time I thought,
and I see that as a really good thing.
Hi, Corinne.
Personally.
Yep.
I'm grateful. I don't want him fulfilling all those things.
Good morning.
And that's a place where we
Good
both
morning.
agree.
I'm so happy I can hear you. How's it
Yes,
going?
and I think that is something that we both
More natural light.
feel pretty strongly about,
Okay,
is that there should be some check on that.
I didn't even think about planning light. I'm used to doing Zoom and not recording it.
Hear that, Austin? I don't know where that's coming from.
I can hear it. I also don't know where it's coming from.
Okay, well, I think we're gone. Okay, go ahead.
And so I look at that concern and I say, one thing we don't currently have, and again, voting yes or no on Amendment A will not achieve this part, but we don't currently have a limit or check on government spending.
Right.
Other than what we as the people are willing to tolerate. And eventually, if they go too crazy high, we're going to kick them out of office, essentially. That's the theory anyways. Are we really good at that in practice? Not really.
It's pretty difficult since we got SB 54. It made it very difficult to replace somebody in office who's already there. Makes it very difficult.
Yeah, assuming they have the funds and all that to go gather those. Mm-hmm. And not every incumbent uses SB 54. But incumbents tend to, even before SB 54, tend to have a pretty easy ride to get back in.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So we have this issue where we're looking at the state of our country going, I really don't want the government just to be spending billions of more dollars. But we also have the issue where they want to put sales tax on service, for example. That bill got rejected by the people in 2019, but they still are continuing to chip away at things like that. They want to, they can do, well, let's just do this one service at a time type thing each year, impose a few more services here and start to get more and more taxes. And so there's a creep to these things where they creep continually along and, do piece by piece. And so in some ways, some people will say, well, should we just let them take it through income tax since they already do? The reason I say no to it is because there's a principle that I've really started pushing on, which is to say checks and balances first, power second. And I don't love just giving the government the power to do something. And right now, I feel personally that the fact they don't like this cap on how they can spend the money means it's preventing something. So it's acting as some form of check and balance, I see. And I believe that it's good to keep it until we can get some real meaningful, potentially discussion on checks and balances or other things in place to say, if we're going to give you the power to spend income tax money wherever you want, maybe we should put a cap on the amount you can tax us, or, different protections, the amount you can spend. I would love a cap on the amount they can spend. And these are some of the pieces where if they really want this ability, I say, well, let's talk as a people, we can give it back. And so this is where I look to it to say, I'm okay keeping it there and trying to fight the incremental approaches that they try and put in on taxes. Because I do hope it helps. When I see the Olympics looming and just the intense incentive to try and spend money, I say I want some form of check and balance there. So that's at least, again, me looking at the future, trying to predict a little of how it goes. But that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. There is nothing that Austin said that I would disagree with, because I do want checks and balances, and we do not have. The only check and balance that we have in the state of Utah on spending at all is the fact that we do have to have a balanced budget, which doesn't mean we don't go into debt. It just simply means that we have to pay our bills. And so if we spend too much, then we have to tax more. It doesn't mean we can't go into debt or can't have loans. It just means we have to pay those debts. We do have to balance our budget, just like a family does, just like a household. So that is the kind of the only check that we have in Utah, which is helpful, but it doesn't prevent us spending more money than we should or to going into debt. So I was around and I was a voter. I was an adult voter when we put this into place, when we changed our constitution to say that all income tax would pay for education only. And I was against it at that time. So I definitely have some leftover from I didn't ever want it in the first place. So for me, it's kind of exciting to get rid of it, because what we do have is we have public education and even higher ed fully funded overly funded. Frankly, higher ed, I think, is overly funded, but it's fully funded, but then we still have money left. And so then they're saying, the legislature says we can't use that money for roads or for the general needs because it's locked in this silo that we can't get to. And if we had that money and access to it, then we wouldn't have to raise other taxes because we could use that money. And so that I totally get and I totally agree with, because we have money sitting there that's not able to, we're not able to tap into and not accessible. But I totally agree with Austin. The reality of it is either way does not solve the real problem. Whether it passes or doesn't pass, the problem of overspending is still there, and we don't. I believe I would like to have a check and balance. I don't really believe that locking it in, to, having that as we do now, locking income tax into education, I don't think it really does give us a check and balance, because, which I like that concept, that we still have the Olympics coming. We still have the baseball stadium. We still have the soccer field that we're paying for. We still have the hockey stadium and team that is coming, that we as citizens are paying the infrastructure of, while a private business will make the proceeds and the profits off of it. So we as citizens are paying for that. So even though we have that check and balance, so to speak, it's not stopping our legislature from overspending. And if we change it so that they can have that money, if we pass Amendment A, unfortunately, I don't see it stopping the legislature in overspending. So I do like the idea of coming up with a solution where this isn't going to go into effect. This gives us as citizens the opportunity to do some fixes and say we want some checks and balances. If we do this, we want to check and balance. What they're doing, they're dangling the carrot of getting rid of food tax as the carrot to get people to vote for this. And I don't agree with that carrot. I like to have things just the bill, the constitutional amendment on its own. They did pass the bill earlier that if this constitutional amendment passes, the food tax would be removed. And I like those to be separate. I don't like to conflate the two. So that is a part of Amendment A that I do not like and do not agree with. I think we should just vote on getting rid of food tax on its own and without another tire string to it. So what?
Yeah, and I just say those are, again, all great points. Things that I look at, and to respond to some of them, one is the food tax one, just to be clear with people. You'll still pay sales tax on food when you go to the grocery store because cities and counties impose it.
Thanks for bringing that up, Austin. Yeah, it only eliminates the state portion.
Yeah,
you'll still have on food. Yes,
it'll reduce it, but not eliminate it. And like you, I don't love the games they play. They learned that Utahns cared about the food tax when they tried to pass sales tax on service, because they actually increased the food tax there. And that's really what led to Harmon's getting involved, and then all the signatures and a bunch of things. And so they're playing the reverse now, trying to put that in front of us to get us to vote for this. But to the point of the Olympics are coming. We have hockey. We have the baseball stadium approved. The legislature committed things. But it's interesting to look at still what they did with it is Salt Lake City, for example, said, okay, Ryan Smith, we're going to help you fund the NHL stadium. And so we're going to increase, and that's through redoing the Delta Center to make it NHL compliant for ice hockey, whatever. They voted, though, to increase sales tax in Salt Lake City. And that increased portion is going to go to fund this. I'm very opposed to that type of arrangement with government. Huge issues there. But the one thing I see, one reason I prefer our government to have to work through sales tax as opposed to income tax is that as a people, I can at least choose not to go shop in Salt Lake City as a protest vote. And that's obviously painful for businesses to get caught in the middle of that type of dispute. But I still, as a person, have something, even if it maybe doesn't make a drop in the bucket, doesn't change anything overall, at least morally or ethically, I can say I'm going to change the way I function because this is a sales tax in a certain area. And I'm going to say that I oppose this. Whereas an income tax, what am I supposed to do? Not work? That just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, income tax feels a lot more like I'm working for the government. And again, maybe it's my mind just playing with myself that either way is giving the government money.
Agree, because they're already dipping in and taking a part of the proceeds of your labors that you must work to survive. Where I agree with you 100%. Sales tax is more, you get to choose what you buy and how much it costs, and you have power over how expensive. You can say, well, I'm going to choose less expensive things, or I'm going to choose more expensive things, and you can tailor that more individually. You have more power over sales tax.
And so it at least, and when I look at the power district that they set up for the Major League Baseball stadium and these others, most of what they're looking at to fund it is sales tax. And they gave the power district and the people they appoint to this commission the ability to implement sales tax and things. And again, one reason for that is because of this boundary on income tax. But the sad thing is, and this is this negates me a little bit on some of the things I say, the power district for the Major League Baseball stadium is probably going to be taxing energy. And so it's going to impose an increased tax on your utility bill. So there's certain sales tax items that we really don't, you just kind of need them. We need our power, we need our food. Mm-hmm. Those two types of sales tax, we're not really changing a whole lot. And that's one that it was interesting to me that they gave the power district the ability to tax energy. And I went, oh, that's really brutal, because that's, again, attacking a fundamental need. And again, to go back and forth on sales tax versus income tax, just to throw out another principle that separates them. Income tax, for people that believe or want a regressive type tax, one that helps the poor get out of being poor, income tax can be less, whereas sales tax is just straight across the board. I personally am more a fan of saying we should all bear a fair share here in America. I'm not saying there's never a place to charge a poor person less in taxes, but just it's a principle that I've struggled with over the years, where I look at how many kids I have, tons of tax credits, different things, which I'm not saying I'm opposed to helping families. That's not what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
But I just look at it and say, but is this the right way to go?
Mm-hmm.
Are there other ways that we can approach these problems and issues rather than through this? And granted, if you have a bunch of kids, it's very difficult to make enough money with this rate of taxes here in America between state and federal. But I look at that and say, but we should be looking at the deeper issues still, which again, we're not here. So I'm kind of pontificating for a minute here. But there is this interesting debate between income tax, sales tax, and so to me, I still lean towards feeling like, at least, again, it could be an illusion, but at least I feel like I have a little bit more veto power, check and balance power, by choosing to buy or not buy. And so I tend to prefer currently forcing them that route and then saying, if you want it bad enough, then let's talk an actual check and balance. Because I go back to when the federal government passed the 16th Amendment to allow the federal government to do income taxes. It used to be unconstitutional. The founders knew that income tax could be a problematic form of taxation. And they actually required in the original Constitution that all taxes be apportioned and collected based on population. It had to kind of be equal across population across America. The founders didn't want...
They taxed the states. They did not tax individuals. It was a tax to the states based on population.
And this was to help, again, make things fair. So they weren't just going to give money to New York and not the other states or something. Exactly. It had to be equal across the board.
Certain populations, people, it was the American way. Everything is equal. Everyone's treated equally.
Yeah. And the 16th Amendment changed all that. It allowed for the income tax, and it allowed for non-apportionment based on population, these different things. And when that happened, the government was just kind of, oh, look at all the good we can do. There's so much that can come from this. Tax rate of 1%, highest will be 7% for the super rich people. Well, within 5 years, it was at 77% for the highest tax bracket.
Yep.
And I look at the 16th Amendment and I just go, why did we not put a cap in there?
Mm-hmm.
If the government was promising us just 1%, why didn't we just say 1%?
My understanding is there was a cap in there, but it was quickly removed.
Not in the amendment itself. So,
fair enough.
So this is something to speak to on amendments A and D,
Right.
because both of them have a promise from the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
But the promise from the legislature is not in the constitutional amendment itself. It's in a statute. And I say, look, if you're really promising this to me, why don't you put it in the constitutional amendment?
Mm-hmm.
When they say, oh, this statute will go into effect that removes the state sales tax on food. Okay, well, how long until you put it back in place? Now, maybe no one up there wants to put it back in place, but there's nothing that prevents them from doing that because it's a statute. Those can be changed legislative session to legislative session, or even call a special session and change it.
They're changed regularly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when they say, oh, we have a protection for you with this amendment, and we'll put the protection in statute, I go back to 1913 and say, 16th Amendment, no, this doesn't work. Put it in the Constitution itself if it's a real protection. So,
and I think that it's really important also to mention that these special districts that have the power, the legislature has given power to Texas, are completely unconstitutional. Taxation without representation. We're being taxed by people and districts who are unelected and unaccountable, that we cannot even have a conversation with, that we can't lobby or talk to, and that is unconstitutional. The taxes must be imposed by an elected body that we can unelect or that we can hold accountable for their decisions. So those are unconstitutional, and that in itself, whether you like it or don't like it, that is something that we need to discuss, and we need to make an issue when we talk to legislators about this. And so I'm hoping that you feel like you have enough information what we need to do now, because this will not be going into effect. So whether you vote yes or no, that what we both would agree on is that we need to make some tweaking and changes before this is put on the ballot again next year. Would you agree with that, Austin?
I would, absolutely.
This gives us a great opportunity. We're seeing kind of all sides of it. And it feels like, to me, whether you vote yes or no, either way, we win some and we lose some of it, where we have the chance now to tweak this amendment so that we can pass it and it can be a win for everyone. Yep, we have that opportunity. Agree. So, okay, we're going to move to Amendment B. And to me, yeah, I guess we might disagree a little bit on Amendment B. Apparently we do. I like Amendment B. So this was written basically by our state treasurer, Marlo Oakes. He is very in favor of it. I'll just read it, and then you can tell us your perspective on it. Shall the Utah Constitution be amended to increase the limit on the annual distributions from the state school fund, the trust land funds, to public schools from 4% to 5% of the fund? So it's only changing at 1%, and it's not touching the principal. It's just touching the interest. We're going to increase it because we have money sitting there that we can't have access to. So we are just going to change it from 4% to 5%, increasing 1%. So we're able to access some of these funds, but it won't reduce the principal. And as Marlo even admits, it's not going to make a huge change, but it does give us access to some of those funds. So what would be your takeaway, or why you would be against this Amendment B?
So I actually fully support Amendment B.
Okay.
It's D. If we get to D, that's the one.
Okay. Okay. And I fully support Amendment B. I don't know of any reason to be against it. I really can't think of an argument against it.
So the main thing would be, some people, to your point, feel that education's overfunded. And so obviously some people are very up in arms and we're not giving enough to education. Will this necessarily mean that teachers get paid more? It won't necessarily mean that, because they could choose to cut income tax or give us a tax cut, or whatever they want to do. But what this does is at least gives the option, if we need more funding or increase teacher salaries or whatever for that group that wants those, But it also, for the group that feels there's enough in education, we can then put pressure on to say lower income taxes because more money is coming out.
Exactly. And that would be what I would prefer, that we lower income tax rate. We're getting money elsewhere where it can only be used on education. We can lower our income tax rate. I think that is the ideal, is to lower that rate. Or to get rid of property tax would be my first choice, which I know this would not compensate. I know that's a super heavy lift, but I believe in miracles. And I do think that we should at least put it on the table and push back. Again, property tax is really unconstitutional because we have a God-given right to life, liberty, and property ownership. And as long as you're paying a tax to the government for the right to own the property that you own free and clear, you can't really own it. The government always has first access to your property. So but I do think this is great. And I think there are, I just can't really, I can't really see a real valid reason to be against Amendment B. So thank you for bringing that up.
And you can kind of tell that there's not a lot of opposition to it because this is actually an interesting thing about all the amendments this year. To my knowledge, none of the amendments fully complied with the legal requirements to be on the ballot.
That's true.
People sued over A and D because there was opposition, but no one's really opposed to B or C, and so there's been no lawsuits. So at that point, but it leaves this interesting door open that someone could get mad later and file a lawsuit, and who knows at that point what happens. But
that is a good
bet
point.
is,
could still happen.
My bet is once it's voted on, the courts will say you kind of lost. You had to act before that. There was plenty of publicity.
The people have spoken. We're done. So, but it's not a huge change either way. It's 1% of interest. So but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and one of the things I would just add is, again, I'm not faulting them at all for increasing their percent. I think it's great. But I still question, why do we not just distribute all the interest? Why are we putting so much interest back into this fund? It's growing huge. And I go, at what point do we take half the interest, 50%? Like there's so much money in this fund. And I don't understand all things associated with it. So I might need a little more education on that. But that is a question that kind of lingers in my mind of, wait, we're only taking 4% of interest?
And we're only changing to 5% because that would be my only negative on this, is we should take at least 10%. We should definitely make it much higher than it is. That is my only rub, is we should increase it. But
we'll take a step in the right direction.
We'll take what we got.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to Constitutional Amendment C. Now, I did not, until this amendment came up, I did not even know that it wasn't in our Constitution. And that it is, shall the Utah Constitution be amended to have the office of county sheriff be elected by the voters? And I hear, when I first read it, I'm like, well, I don't even get what this is about, because our sheriffs in every county in the state of Utah are elected. There are no appointed sheriffs. They're all elected. So this just puts in the Constitution that the sheriffs have to be elected. And just for everyone to know, the sheriff is the only elected law enforcement. They are the sentinel or the guardian from the federal government, the only law enforcement that's elected that is a guardian from the federal government to protect the county and our state. And so with all the sheriffs. And so I totally support sheriffs being elected. And I totally support this amendment. And I have heard some people kind of with some concerns. Do you have any concerns about Amendment C, or can you see any reason why we wouldn't be opposed to it in any way?
Yeah, so I think the principle of it is sound.
Yes.
The concern then just goes to, are we as the people of America willing to do the work and responsibility necessary to elect good people? Because this is one of the concerns, and this concern comes either way, whether they're appointed or elected. More so, I think, if they're appointed. But you could still have money influence a sheriff's election.
Absolutely.
And so we as a people have to be aware that just because we can vote doesn't mean it's going to be good necessarily. We can still choose something bad or something conflicted.
We've seen us elect people that are lack integrity, and lack an understanding of constitutional principles. So we know we can and we do elect people that are unprincipled. And that can still happen with the sheriff. And there are sheriffs in the state of Utah who are not willing to stand up and to protect the people.
Yeah.
If they need it.
And so this is what this right is. It's really us voting for a responsibility to say, yes, I want to forever have this responsibility to really make sure we do good with our sheriffs. And it's interesting because I don't believe the sheriff races get a whole lot of press or look from the public beforehand.
They don't get vetted as much as they should be, but I think a lot of people don't really know how to vet a sheriff, and they don't really know the questions to ask, which would be, Are you willing to stand up to the federal government if they try to come in and take over and usurp power and authority they do not have? Will you stand up to the federal government? That's the number one question I ask.
Yeah,
and if that is no, then I'm not impressed.
Yeah, and these are things that, again, one of the things I feel strongly, if no matter how you vote on these amendments, except B, but Amendment A, C, and D, your vote, I believe you need to take responsibility for it and act in accordance with it. Because again, A doesn't solve all the problems either way. C ensures we have a right, but that also means we have a responsibility and we need to live up to it. And I will admit, I have not been as active as I should in sheriff races. And it's something that I realized looking at Amendment C and starting to study it. I went, wow, there's a lot of influence and power in this position. It's a huge check and balance type position, and I need to become more involved in it. So I appreciated seeing Amendment C to help me realize I need to be more involved, and I'm planning on voting yes, but with the understanding that that's me saying I agree to be more responsible and more involved in these as they go forward.
Well said, Austin. I so agree with you. That's such a good point. It's very important. If we're going to put it in our Constitution that we are to elect them, then we better vet them and we better hold them accountable, because now we're saying that is constitutionally our responsibility, which already has been. But yeah, that's very good. It does bring that awareness to us that we have that responsibility. Absolutely love it. Okay. Now we're going to move to Constitutional Amendment D. Would you like to read Constitutional Amendment D? We'll just introduce that to everybody.
So the description for D, and there is so much to talk about with D.
Yes, there is a lot, but we have time. I'm thrilled.
Okay. Your ballot, this is what your ballot says, and take it with a grain of salt because this was not written by independent voices. This was written by people trying very hard to get this passed.
True.
But the ballot title says, should the Utah Constitution be changed to strengthen the initiative process by prohibiting foreign influence on ballot initiatives and referendums, clarifying the voters and legislative bodies' ability to amend laws. If approved, state law would also be changed. So again, remember, these weren't promises they gave us in the Constitution. These are ones they put in state law or statute, which they can change at any time. But currently, they're promising us, if approved, state law would also be changed to allow Utah citizens 50% more time to gather signatures for a statewide referendum. That equates to 20 days extra time.
Austin, I know that this is probably not the right time, but I want to be sure people understand. An initiative is when you have the citizens gather signatures in order to put a law on the ballot. So instead of going to the legislature to pass a law, the citizens gather signatures to do an initiative to put a law out that in a democratic process, like a democracy, the citizens vote for a law. A referendum is when you do the same thing only to repeal or amend a law that's passed. So a referendum is to repeal, an initiative is to make a law or a bill.
Yeah.
And that's what this would give the citizens 50% more time to gather signatures to do a referendum.
Which is a repeal of a law that the legislature passed. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. But this is not giving more time on a ballot initiative.
Correct. So if
gather signatures.
Exactly, which is an important distinction. Okay, go ahead.
And then it also says that state law would be changed to establish requirements for the legislature to follow the intent of a ballot initiative. So I don't think it's possible to fully understand this one without going back to the history of it a little bit, of what
Fair enough.
produced this situation. So in 2018, if I remember right, the year, we had 3 ballot initiatives on the ballot. We had
Right.
medical marijuana, that's the one most people remember.
Yes.
And then we had Medicaid expansion, and we also had this anti-gerrymandering ballot initiative.
Right.
Now, gerrymandering is kind of a big word. You throw it out in politics. And it means that the party in power goes and draws lines for voting districts in a way that splits up the minority party's people. So if you think about Salt Lake County, there are clusters in Salt Lake County of very strong Democrat groups. People, it's interesting how we as a people are. We tend to associate and go to neighborhoods where it's more like who we are.
I think that's worldwide. I think it's just natural law. I think
Correct.
People tend to gather with people they have things in common. You see, when we founded America, the Chinese would have Chinatown, the Italians would be together, they would go and end up living near other people with they have things in common culturally, language. It's just natural. Nothing wrong with it. It's natural. And people with the same ideology, plus the fact that big cities always tend to be more liberal. That's just a natural way. Rural areas tend to be more conservative, and big cities tend to be more, well, they don't tend to be, they are more liberal.
Yeah. And again, like you say, that part's natural.
It is.
What people argue is unnatural is when the legislature comes in and draws. So Utah's 4 congressional districts all come into Salt Lake City and chop up the most liberal part of it. So they take some and then distribute that throughout all 4 corners of the state. And
so
this is something.
It's kind of like you take the state of Utah and do kind of like pie or pizza slices. It's kind of like that. So every congressional district has some rural area and everyone has some urban area, so that every congressman or woman is representing rural and suburban.
And that is, I mean, again, there's many ways to paint this. So let's say optimistic way to look at it. There's pessimists that look at it and say it's clear you're just keeping power. This is purely to, break up Democrat votes type thing.
Right.
And the thing to know is this isn't a reflection on Utah necessarily. This is something that politically happens across the country everywhere it exists. And some people say, I've had some people tell me, well, we shouldn't even draw districts. And I go, well, okay, we have to draw districts because in Utah, we have 75 House reps that are distributed among the population. Their district goes to a certain area. You have to pick where they represent and where they don't, where one district starts, where it stops.
I mean, if you think about it, it will happen like Bountiful City. We have 6 city council members. Every one of them lives on the East Bench. They live where there's high incomes and a lot of money. None of them live in the flatlands or the lower part because those areas of Bountiful are not even represented, because everyone, in order to get in office, you have to have a lot of money. You have to be willing to spend a lot of money. And so I think that proves the point that you're saying. You want representatives from the area. So we divide those areas up so people can elect people from their area to represent them. That's correct. The design. That's the idea.
And that is the intent of a House of Representatives, is to say each group gets someone.
Same with the Senate.
Yep. And the Senate, at least the original Senate in the federal level was designed to represent the states. Correct. States are a little different in their Senate makeup because they're not representing states.
No, they're representing an area.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just a 3 times bigger area.
Yeah, they have less people. But overall, we divide the state up into districts, trying to give representation more closely to the people. Mm-hmm. And to your point about the cities, some cities have voted to just be what they call them at-large districts, essentially, where everyone can come from the same area in the city. Some cities are split up by district, and you actually have to live in your district to run for city council. And that helps ensure that you don't get the Bountiful issue where they're all from one place in the city.
Right.
But from my perspective, it's super important to draw districts. And every 10 years, these districts have to change because our population is changing. We do a new census at 10 years, and then we have the new information, and so we update them. So in 2018, this group said, we're getting sick and tired of the legislature drawing such bizarre districts. It's so clear that they're, trying so hard to keep the Democrats out of office and things. Because some people say Utah's more than a quarter Democratic. For Democrat Party. So out of one of 4 reps in Congress, we should have at least 1 Democrat and the other 3 be Republicans. Now, there's a million ways, like you say, to slice that pie or that pizza. There's all kinds of arguments for or against that. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. I'm just passing along what people said.
Exactly.
But ultimately, Utahns voted for this. And what this bill said, this anti-gerrymandering bill, is they said, we don't want the legislature to draw the districts anymore. We don't trust them to do this fairly. And we want an independent commission that gets set up, and there's people there that go to work and they draw all the new districts, and they're going to pick boundaries such as a road, a big road, or a stream, or a river, or a mountain. So instead of having a district that takes a little chunk on this side of the mountain and goes over the mountain and takes a little chunk over here, or a district that cuts really far and narrow across Salt Lake City or Salt Lake County, we have a couple of those here. That cuts across 3 cities, for example. They just go, no, just pick more natural boundaries, make the districts look fair. And Utah voters said, okay, that's what we want. So they passed this ballot initiative, which, to your point, was a new law the legislature had not done. And come 2019, the legislature looks at it and says, that was cute, but we still want the power to draw districts. So they amended the law and said the commission stays, but it is only advisory in nature. It will issue a opinion to us of what we should do, but we get to do whatever we want at the end.
Right.
So come 2020, we have the census. 2021, I believe, new districts get drawn. And maybe even 2022, I forget exactly when it was. But the commission puts up theirs, and they look just like normal, happy little shapes. And then Utah puts up theirs, and they're all squiggly all over the place, looking kind of crazy. And Utah says, yeah, independent commission, we don't like yours at all. We reject all of them. So they literally rejected 100% of what the commission proposed, do their own thing. And then this led to a lawsuit by groups that were hoping to get more Democrats and others in office by changing the way these were drawn. And so they sue. And I don't think a lot of people gave their lawsuit much thought or credence. It was just kind of viewed as a angry type thing until July of this year, when the Utah Supreme Court said, you know what, there are issues here. And the issue that the Utah Supreme Court honed in on is they said, the Utah Constitution says that the people's right to legislate and the legislature's right to legislate are co-equal. And the Utah Constitution says that the people maintain the right to alter or reform their government as they see fit. And the people's argument in this lawsuit to the Supreme Court was, and this is the Utah Supreme Court, they said, if the legislature can just take back power that we took away from it, we have no ability to alter or reform our government. And so ultimately, the Utah Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, agreed and said, yeah, if the legislature can just take back a power that you as the people took away, then you have no right to alter or reform your government. So they said, Utah legislature, in virtually 99% of cases, you can't change something where they took away your power. This produced intense firestorm of concern among the legislature and many people. California, if you look to California, or some states that have very simple ballot initiative processes, their constitutions are changing all the time, their statutes are changing all the time, and they get bizarre laws through. All kinds of wild things happening. And not just bizarre, but ones that really damage your state, really damage your liberty type thing.
They actually destroy the republic. California is not really, I don't know how anyone would classify the state of California being governed by a republic. It's more of a democracy, or maybe even a socialist state. It seems very socialistic to me.
Yeah, and again, there's still remnants of a republic there. You still vote for officials. They can pass laws
Yes.
too. They can do
Well,
all those things.
you can vote for representatives in a democracy, and they've really turned their republic into a democracy by all of these initiatives because they have tons of them. And they have jungle primaries. So electing people is a matter of who spends the most money because you don't have parties picking their representatives. They have jungle primaries. So it's kind of like how you would run a democracy.
Yeah, there's plenty, and I guess at least just to clarify, my perspective of a pure democracy is no elected officials.
Okay.
If there's elected officials making decisions, there's at least some form of a republic left. From what I see. And again, I'm not pretending like it's strong or anything. Just
right.
There's at least a skeleton of it there that I can see. But yes, but the people are voting on all kinds of things, and the concern with there's a number of concerns with ballot initiatives. One is they don't go through the legislative vetting process. It's just I could just write, everyone give $1 million to Austin, put it on as a ballot initiative, go get signatures, and then people can vote on it, and suddenly I get $1 million. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no vetting to say, is this a good thing? I don't even have to care, is the person drafting it, whether it balances the budget or not. It can throw the budget out of whack. It can do all kinds of things.
Exactly.
And in addition, if you think about a ballot, Salt Lake County has this issue right now where they had to print a 2-page ballot. It's the first time in history because of the number of candidates on it. There's a lot more independents and third parties running. So the list is longer. And there are 179 candidates that Salt Lake County has to list on their ballot. Now, the people here don't vote for every one of those because there's different ballot versions based on what city you live in and what council you're voting for and things.
Yeah, your districts.
But it's a lot of people to research. But if you add to that the need to research 20 new proposed laws every time, people start to burn out. This is why we elect people, why we look at things.
This is the reason we have a republic and we're required to have a republic is because we don't have the time or the infrastructure or the desire to read every bill. We propose 950 bills a year at the legislature. How many of the citizens, how many people actually read those, vet them, even get informed at all on them? And the legislature has to do that. They're elected to do that. And so in the initiative process, that's what we would do. The citizens would read and get vetted. And like you say, it's just so taxing and so laborious, and people burn out very quickly, like they have in California.
Yep. And so this is troubling. And again, the legislature's upset. Now, I don't believe for a second that, all of their frustration comes from a pure love for Utah. I'm not saying there's not ones up there that have that. They obviously have issues with their power being challenged as well. But there are many that deeply care, and they know that ballot initiatives tend to have issues not going through this vetting process. And so as I look at Amendment D, I say, yeah, there's some big concerns. And so then I had hoped, I had contributed to the conversation. I had put out ideas and things as they were asking for what to do. And they eventually came out with this proposal for Amendment D. And I was deeply disheartened by their proposal to fix it, to say the least. Now, but to clarify on this, and it's interesting, we don't now get to choose on Amendment D because the Supreme Court kicked it out. The main reason the Supreme Court kicked it out was because the description on the ballot was so misleading about what was happening. And so this is what
I actually have to agree that I feel like that it was clearly written by those who support it. It was not written to be kind of balanced. Even though I actually agree with it, I don't feel that it's very balanced. I so agree with you.
Yeah, the description is just, it doesn't even tell the people that they're losing a constitutional right found by the Supreme Court. Now, whether or not you agree that that right is as it states, the fact they don't even disclose that they're overturning a Utah Supreme Court case that gave citizens rights that, had never been formally recognized before. It's a pretty big, in law, we call it a fraudulent omission, when you don't disclose something that would radically influence someone's decision to buy something, it can be considered fraud. And the courts, when they looked at it, again, I didn't even know why the legislature fought it so much. I was going, you're going back to the Supreme Court that found this, right? And you're going to try and argue to them that you can amend the Constitution without even telling the people about this case or what's going on. I didn't see any chance of it surviving, and it didn't. But this issue will come up, and it's going to percolate because we have people already that have ballot initiatives ready to go on jungle primaries and these other things.
Mm-hmm.
They want this in Utah. They want to change the very nature of things here.
Life. They want to make it so it's easy to get an abortion at all stages. So there's actually quite a number of initiatives that are all ready to go. They're just waiting.
Yeah, and they'll probably start gathering signatures here soon, I would imagine.
Yes.
Now, I also wouldn't be surprised if, because Amendment D was voided, I wouldn't be surprised if this legislative session in January they pass a bill significantly increasing the number of signatures necessary for initiative. Now, will the Supreme Court find that constitutional? If they go too high, probably not, but they may not care because it could still delay these things for a couple of years while they work on another amendment. But ultimately, what they did in this, and again, so there's two areas I have concerns. One is they did include a protection in the Constitution that, to my knowledge, I at least never heard people really talking about it. Maybe, Dalane, you heard something different, but they have this provision in there banning a foreign individual, entity, or government from participating in an initiative or referendum.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And yes, we've had some foreign stuff taking place, but I had never heard of an allegation in Utah that it was happening here in Utah. I'm not saying that doesn't mean it won't.
Well, plus the fact that, I think the fact that we have a great deal of land that is owned by the Chinese government is very concerning. And so they can see in other states, as well as Utah, that I can tell you that Chinese immersion, huge, where they have influenced our laws, not through an initiative, but they've done it through our laws. So they definitely see a lot of foreign money coming into our state. And of course, if you strengthen the initiative process where there's no oversight for the legislature, you're opening it up. You're basically just saying, welcome to Utah, have at it. We no longer have a republic. This is a democracy. Come on in and persuade. Because we don't trust our legislature, and I hate to say this out loud, but we also don't trust the uninformed, uninvolved, uninformed citizenry. So we're in a difficult spot because, yeah, we have issues with our legislature. If we didn't, we wouldn't be in this mess. If the legislature honestly would have done their job and not been been a better job representing the people, we wouldn't have so many initiatives. But we do have a lot of initiatives, and they are very problematic. They have caused a lot of havoc in our state. And I do think that, of course, we don't wait until China comes in and other countries come in and start to change our state. We should be proactive and do it in advance. So I think it's very wise and a very good part of the initiative is to keep foreign money from coming in. But I also feel the same way about money from out of state, because if foreign countries or foreign entities or even national entities want to come in and change Utah into a blue state.
Yeah, and these are things that I agree with you on. I'm just saying that, again, the amendment to prohibit it was also giving the legislature the right to change anything. So they could still, even without prohibiting foreign influence, if foreign money came in and passed a crazy ballot initiative, the legislature, if the rest of the amendment passed without that provision, would still have the ability to check and balance that. And so when I look at it and I'm saying, what's going on here? To me, it felt like a political game. As soon as I saw the proposal, I was going, wait a minute. Why did they insert something in the Constitution that people weren't crazy demanding up to this point? It's a brand new thing. And I agree, we should be proactive. We should be forward thinking. But then when I saw their description, and the first line in it to Utah is, should we amend the Constitution to prohibit foreign influence? I mean, oh, that makes sense. What they're doing is they're trying to say, oh, we're here to protect you while they're taking back a power. Now, again, do I agree there could be some protection? Yes. But when they don't disclose the rest of things and they're saying, hey, look over here, we're going to, deal with the foreign issues and take back the power, that we could overdo it and, overturn it anyways if we had this power, I go, all right, it feels like you're now really, really playing a crazy political game. And I think the courts agreed. The courts were just, whoa, this is a little wild. But one other issue I will throw out that a lot of people don't talk about on prohibiting foreign influence in these things is that I don't know that it survives a constitutional challenge to completely ban foreigners from being involved, because we pass laws that impact them. If they own property here in the state, then we are now at a place where we have to, we have to respect that they have some property rights. They have other things in place. Sorry, my son just broke in here. I'm going to take him out real quick.
You got 8 kids, Austin. I think you've done well. So yeah, Austin has a real family, and he is an amazing attorney, and you can see how really brilliant he is. And so most of these issues, we actually very much agree, but we both, I think I can speak for Austin in saying we both want, neither one of us think this is a perfect amendment. I lean towards it. He leans against it. But we both agree that it needs to be fixed. It needs to be amended in order to really do its job.
Yeah, and then to go on, so then in statute, they promise us, they say, okay, but we will promise that we won't change the, I'll just read their language, at least their summary, they're telling Utahns. It's actually not quite this true. This is also a little misleading. But they claim on the ballot that they will establish requirements for the legislature to follow the intent of a ballot initiative. And so I look at that and I say, so you're telling me that we need to guard against jungle primaries. But if you're going to put into law that the legislature can't change the intent, which is a jungle primary, if the jungle primary passes, they're still not going to be able to replace the jungle primary. And so I look at this and go, if I'm to support it, I actually want there to be a check and balance on ballot initiatives. If we're promising as a result of this to follow the general intent of one of these, and they're saying, so for example, with medical marijuana, they said we kept medical marijuana, but we tweaked some of the things to help prevent some issues. Which in fairness, I will say the sponsor of that initiative, Connor Boyack, he worked with the legislature. He agreed. He says, I've never written a bill before. It's not my forte. He's very smart, but he's like, writing a bill is very different. And he said, he worked with them and he agreed with the changes that were made. And the problem with an initiative is the way you start it is the way it ends. You can't tweak it, fix it, make any alterations during the process. So then the process is to make those tweaks and amendments after, because you can't make them during. And the people are representatives, they're elected representatives. So I agreed with those changes, and even the sponsor of the initiative agreed with those changes. He was on board, he worked with them, and he liked the changes that they made. So they weren't changing the intent or changing it other than perfecting it or making it better, improving it. Yeah, but if you go to the flip side of the same year of the gerrymandering bill,
yes,
when the people said, we don't want the legislature to have this power, we want it to be in this independent commission, and the legislature says, oh, we'll just take that back and make that advisory only, then we're suddenly at this place where, well, are they respecting the general intent of the bill just by keeping the commission in place?
Fair enough. I totally agree with you.
I don't actually believe so.
No, I agree with you. But also, I think it's also important to note that the citizens, again, that was an initiative that was written with misinformation, that was very slanted, and the people did not understand the ramifications of that when they voted for it. Because when people would go, oh, this seems really great. And when I would explain what it actually did, they were against it. I was very against that initiative. I still am. And so I feel like, again, the people voted for it because the people didn't understand it, and they were misinformed. and they weren't given all the information that they needed in order to vote on that initiative, which is what happens with initiatives, because people vote for it based on, just like D, it was written with an agenda. That initiative was written with an agenda, and there wasn't really enough. Again, the citizens, we do not have the funds, we don't have the resources and the money to educate the citizenry on it. And so they voted for that initiative without being educated on it, because the only ones pouring money into that were the people that were supporting the initiative.
Well, and I will maybe push back a little on that. I also spoke against it during that time, but I encountered very many people who really wanted it, even understanding the ramifications of it. And there'd been a push for a long time, a societal push, a bigger narrative of, gerrymandering, the unfairness of it, different things. And it's one that even I talked to quite a few Republicans that say, yeah, I think there should be one Democrat rep from Utah in the federal government. I just think that's fair. And so it was interesting. I agree there is misinformation out there, but misinformation also flies on both sides in the sense of
100%.
There's nothing that gives either side a leg up when it comes to not having misinformation.
Boy, so true. Yeah.
And so it's this thing of, so when I look at it, it's easy to blame that. It's kind of like, I even look at it with, if you go into looking at Trump, the voting record of people for or against Trump. When people look at it, they treat it as if they're just looking at a historical voting trends, and they're like, oh, look, we can account for all these things, but when it comes to Trump, everything kind of goes wild. And so people will say there must be voter fraud as a result of some of these discrepancies. Now, I'm not saying for or against that, but when I look at it, I say, but the thing I never hear people account for with this is the fact that people actually feel so passionately one way or the other about Trump, far more passionately than any other candidate. I don't believe we can look at historical trends to accurately completely understand the picture. And so when we talk about voters in Utah and we assign this general thing to them, yes, there are people that are uninformed and vote, but there are also people that try. And now maybe they get bad information, maybe they don't get the complete picture, maybe they didn't fully understand. But I have been interested by how many people actually like certain things that I'm surprised they like. So I'm just throwing that out. And
because
this is, again,
we're not monolithic. We're individual, and we're not all like, oh, if you're a member of the Republican Party, you all think the same. If you're a member of the Democratic Party, you all think the same. It's not true. We're kind of on different scales and different issues. But I do think the concern I have with initiatives, which is why I'm supporting D, the concern I have is initiatives are really, without maybe very rare exception, the people that are uninformed, uninvolved, and uneducated voting on things they really don't have all the information on. And it is very hard to get all the information. And the other problem is we never pass a bill through the legislature, through our legislative branch, through the republic process of when the legislature passes a bill, which is how we do in a republic, where the legislature gets a chance to bring everyone together and they change the bill. I've never seen a bill start and end in the same form. It always makes changes because we go into committee and then they're like, propose ideas. That's a great idea. I appreciate that's a friendly amendment. We get feedback, we go through all these steps, and so it makes all these changes, and it's truly vetted. The bill is vetted by all parties, not just Republicans, not just Democrats, not just independents, but all parties weigh in. All citizens have a chance, and all lobbyists have a chance to weigh in, so the bill doesn't start and end the same. And the problem with an initiative is you're going out to the uninformed, uneducated, not that they're uneducated, but uneducated on this issue, and uninvolved people that are making decisions without vetting or really understanding the true ramifications. And so to take the power from the legislature and say, you can't tweak it and fix it without very, very small prescriptive opportunities or in certain circumstances, but mostly they can't change it. That an initiative starts and ends exactly the same. You can't change one word of it. That's problematic. That's a democracy. That's not a republic.
And that I completely agree with. But that exact principle is why I'm so concerned by Amendment D.
Yes.
Because when they say we will honor the general intent of the initiative, we won't change that. I say, well, all of the fear that we're putting out about all the bad bills we're going to be running through it, or all the bad initiatives we're going to be running, then the legislature still can't change it with Amendment D, because they're saying we can't change the general intent. So if the jungle primary comes through, or if making abortion legal at all stages comes through, they can't change that, because that's the general intent of the bill. And so to me, when the legislature said, oh, give us the power back to change things, but we agree we won't change the general intent, I said, but this is, I actually want you to have the power to change the general intent in some situations.
That's so true. But I think, like, when you figure Medicare expansion, the legislature, the people voted for this with so lacking all the information that they needed to make this decision. Very bad decision, because they didn't understand it was going to make their taxes go up, what it was going to cost. We could not possibly do that and balance our budget. It literally put us into bankruptcy as a state if we would have followed it. The legislature had to tweak it and make changes, because the well-intended, big heart, loving, amazingly generous people of Utah did not understand what it was going to do to our state. And they voted for it without the knowledge and the understanding. That the legislature didn't remove the intent, change the intent. The intent was to expand Medicaid. They still did, but they didn't do it to the extent that it would completely damage irrevocably Utah. It still did damage us, but not to the same. And so they were able to maintain that intent. And I couldn't agree with you more. I would love the legislature to be able to change some intents, because I don't agree with some intents. And I am not living in total fear, but I am concerned, very much so, that big money wins. Big money is why we have the leaders we have. It's not because we have the people that get voted on by the delegates. The delegates vote so wisely, and not perfectly, but at least they get to meet and vet the candidates. And so you take it to the Republic, and the delegates vote much more wisely when you take it out to the general populace. They don't vet the candidates. They don't know. They listen to the commercials. They listen to the radio spots. They get the flyers, the talking points, and they vote not so wisely. And that's what I see happening without exception on initiatives. So I want to preserve our Republic.
I do too. But on that point,
I know you do.
The flip side of that, though, as I say, to this big money point. So we're concerned about big money pushing ballot initiatives, but we're also concerned about big money pushing representatives and legislators.
Absolutely. I'm so concerned about it.
The true will of the people. And so when I look at it, I say, so if I'm going to give the government the power to check and balance ballot initiatives, which I believe very strongly there needs to be a very healthy check and balance on ballot initiatives. I actually believe we can change the initiative process to allow for changes, to allow for some input and improve that side of it.
I agree. I love that.
But but when we're looking at, we have this, we're going to be in this battle, you could say, against big money, whether it's through the ballot initiative, whether it's through our government officials, whatever it is. And at the point, and so I go back to, well, what did the founders give us? And what I believe they gave us is the check and balance. As I said, there are term limits, essentially, because a term ends. You can vote someone out of office. But the real, like the heart of a republic is this vote, our ability to vote, to select our people, to choose, to put them up. And that's been greatly trampled on. SB 54 really circumvents the private rights of parties, the private rights of individuals to associate, to choose, to do things. And what I view with this is, okay, again, to my principle of checks and balances first, power second. I say, okay, government, I want you to have the ability to check and balance, but only if I can trust I have a check and balance over you. I can't just give you unlimited power. And so if you want this back, the correct thing to me is to say, I will give you the check and balance power over all law, because that's where I believe it should be in a republic. And it's not to say that citizens can't run initiatives and work on things. And there may even be an argument for having a space for certain issues that the government just refuses to ever take up because it's against their interests. And again, this right to alter or reform. I'm not saying it should be this unchecked legislative power. But the people, I believe, need to have the assurance that they can check and balance those in power. And without that assurance, to me, it's just this hollow thing of like, oh, I'm afraid of money over here, so I'll transfer it straight into the hands of money here. And I go, why would I do that? Because again, right now, at least, and again, maybe it's an illusion, but at the moment, the Supreme Court said, hey, we do have this big money issue. So people, here's this power. It kind of sits in your hands at the moment. Right now, I could choose to run a ballot initiative that changes and repeals SB 54, or that forces some accountability, transparency with elections, or that makes it so our lieutenant governor doesn't get to oversee their own election. We could start to change different things to put checks and balances in place. And currently, the government can't change that. And so we have this very interesting opportunity. And again, it's a double-edged sword. We have a high concern. We have a high opportunity. But even to fill in a little, so to go back to marijuana, Medicaid, and gerrymandering, those three were along a scale that I think is interesting. Marijuana, the legislature kept the intent of. They cleaned up some of the things in the bill that were bad. Connor agrees, that type of thing. Medicaid, though, I actually disagree that they preserve the full intent. I believe they preserve part of the intent.
I agree with you 100%. A part of the intent. Yeah.
They kept part of the intent in place. But even under the Supreme Court's ruling in July, I actually believe the legislature would have been allowed to change the Medicaid ballot initiative, because the court did expressly say that, if there is something that's going to essentially bankrupt the state, there's this compelling interest.
Right.
They can still step in and change it.
Yes.
And so I view Medicaid as still being addressable under the current paradigm. But when it comes to the gerrymandering bill, I don't believe that under their proposal currently, they could change the gerrymandering bill. Because they say, we're going to keep the general intent. And I say, well, if you take that power back, you're not preserving the general intent. You can't do that, because that strips virtually everything out of it. Which, again, I go back to this place then of saying, so am I better off voting for this? Because the Utah Supreme Court said they can change anything in any bill that doesn't change the form of government. So marijuana is untouched by the Supreme Court decision. And even Medicaid, arguably, is untouched by the Supreme Court decision because it didn't change the form of government. It was only gerrymandering that did. And I go back to things like abortion. Abortion is not changing the form of government. Our legislature still has full power to change that. A jungle primary would change our form of government. But that's where I go to this protection they put in place to say we're going to keep the general intent in place. I go, if they just changed our form of government and you take the power back, you're going to violate that general intent provision. And so I don't feel that I'm giving you any power you don't currently have. I don't feel this is fixing the problem. And it could cement bigger issues in if we really keep this in place. Now, granted, they put it in a statute, so they could repeal that statute at some point. But this would be quite the fire to play with the Supreme Court that's already struck them down twice on trying to play a game with these things. But I look at this and I just say, yeah, I know, legislature, you have a lot of power still. Like, they can still change so much. It's the Supreme Court's ruling was a very narrow place of things that change our form of government, which, again, maybe we have this plethora of things come out now because people will be excited about it and there'll be all changes to our government proposed. But it's incumbent on us as a people to recognize, but even if I vote for Amendment D and the legislature agrees they can't change the intent of it, then I'm going, I'm not comfortable with that, legislature. That's not what I'm comfortable with. Take me to a place of comfort, which is to say, I want you to be wise and go through things and balance all the interests, hear from all the competing voices, refine things, make it better. And that will include changing the intent at times, I believe. But I also want the ability to be assured my vote counts. And if you're doing crazy things, if you're voting for a sales tax on service, I want to be able to say no to you. And I want you to not have the SB 54 route to circumvent the process, go through the selection process, be involved. And so I believe that we as a people, and especially now the Supreme Court struck it down anyways, we can go back and say, look, the real concern isn't in preserving the intent of something. The real concern is in, can we check and balance appropriately? Can we put proper checks and balances all over the place? And we just have the discussion. The legislature wants checks and balances. They're concerned about it. And so we say, we agree with you. So listen to our concerns about checks and balances, and let's put some real election stuff in place. Let's not be satisfied with an audit that takes a sample of signatures, for example, finds a whole bunch of issues and still says it's okay. I say we need real transparency. We need real accountability. We need some real things in place to protect and to choose and protect constitutional rights of association, to select our own people, these types of things. And I don't believe it's appropriate for big money or the government to commandeer a party and say, we're going to use your name and your label, even though you didn't choose us. That's simply wrong. And I view this situation as, yes, there's uncertainty. Yes, it's concerning. But, and so we as a people have a high duty to be very involved these next 2 years, to be working very hard to educate, to be educated, and to really stay vigilant. But we need to be talking to the legislature and getting, I believe, a better balance in place. That's my
I would not disagree with that one tiny bit. And this does give us the opportunity to work with the legislature and improve this initiative, improve this constitutional amendment, make it better. In the next 2 years, though, people need to be very aware of the initiatives that do come up. And that is what my biggest concern is before we can get this constitutional amendment fixed and tweaked so that we like it. What kind of initiatives will be brought forth and what will they do to our state? I am very concerned because I'm concerned about the ones that are on the plate right now. But I am unashamedly and unapologetically pro-life. And I just feel that the Constitution does not allow for us to end the life of our own children, our own unborn children, our own preborn children. I do think that is unconstitutional. And I get it. I mean, we can, debate lots of people on this. I know people disagree with me, but I feel like that is our role as citizens of this great nation and this great state, is that we as people, as adults, we are to protect the most vulnerable. And so I am very concerned. Planned Parenthood already has an initiative, and they're very good at marketing and they're very good at messaging. And I remember I was at a conference when one of the people that came up with the catchphrase pro-choice, they got together. He was very pro-abortion. They got together one night, they're partying, they're drinking, they're trying to think of, okay, how do we market this? They came up with the term pro-choice, and they were laughing, thinking this is so fun because pro-choice, like, how can the conservatives be against pro-choice? They're all about liberty. They're all about freedom. How are they going to counter pro-choice? Because pro-choice sounds like something we would say. It sounds wonderful. And how are they going to be against it? And yet they have marketed it well. And so people, now we see our culture and our society shifted because pro-choice does sound very positive. It sounds wonderful. When what they're really saying, there is no choice involved. There's no choice for a human being. They are literally crushed. Their life is crushed out of the provider of their life. And so I think, and I don't think we're ever going to end abortion by laws and initiatives or laws. We're going to end abortion by education. We're going to end abortion by changing the hearts of people and helping them to understand what it really is. But I do think we have some laws to protect the unborn. So those are my concerns about not getting this in place so that we can protect our republic. Because I'm concerned about the process and the republic.
Yes, and those are things I share, all those concerns. I share your sentiment that unborn children should have constitutional protections. But one thing, again, at least one ray of hope, is that an abortion initiative is not touched by this Supreme Court ruling. They can still change that. And that the Supreme Court ruling actually said in it, the legislature can change anything that doesn't change the form of government. Still. Sorry, I've lost sound.
Okay, so you're saying that if the Planned Parenthood passed an initiative making abortion legal up to 15 weeks, that the legislature could still go in and amend that?
Yes.
Make it 6 weeks?
Yes.
They couldn't do what we already passed in Utah. They couldn't make abortion illegal. They couldn't do that.
Well, they can keep doing it.
That would change the intent of the initiative.
No, sorry. So right now there's no ban. Right now there is no ban on the legislature changing the intent of an initiative. Right. And the Supreme Court said openly in its case, the legislature can change anything it wants unless it's an initiative that changes the form of government. So currently the legislature has the power to completely change or completely repeal an abortion initiative. If we passed Amendment D, they would lose the ability to change the general intent of the abortion initiative. And this is why I'm so concerned about Amendment D. I say, why are you doing this, legislature? You have the power right now to change the general intent of a bill, unless it's changing the form of government. But they're saying, oh, if you let us just give us the ability to tweak things and we'll keep the general intent in place. I go, no, that's not a good trade. I really don't like that trade, because we've had so few ballot initiatives, so few that change the form of government.
True. Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to say, oh, because we're concerned about the few that change the form of government, and we're going to apply this now restriction to all ballot initiatives to say we can't change the intent of all ballot initiatives, I go, whoa, this is a huge trade in the wrong direction, because this is actually, I believe, supporting democracy more now, because why would I agree that we should just keep the general intent in place on a really bad bill?
Okay, so
and this is an area where I was deeply concerned by their trading, their gamesmanship here.
Mm-hmm.
To go, no, legislature, don't overreact to what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said the form of government couldn't be altered by you. So if the people change the form of government, you couldn't veto that. But they said in their case, you can still veto everything else you want. That's part of the process. And so the abortion bill gets thrown out a lot. And I say, but the case didn't touch the abortion bill. The legislature still has the power to change all of that currently. If we passed Amendment D, they would lose the ability to change the general intent of it, which is concerning to me.
Okay, well, we would agree on that. That is concerning to me. And we do need to, I'm 100% in favor of, even though I don't really like initiatives, I don't like the process of initiatives, I do think that we need to maintain the ability for the people to go around the legislature, even though I don't like it, because it's a democracy. But I do feel, especially with SB 54, when it is so hard to elect the people, because we have this situation right now where we did, in the state of Utah, legally, we elected Phil Lyman to be our governor. And then we had our sitting governor, Governor Cox, went around the republic and the process and using SB 54 and gathered signatures and paid to buy his way onto the ballot. But as we do know now from the legislative audit, that he did not get enough signatures, valid signatures, to be on the ballot. And
well, I actually, just to clarify, I don't think the audit formally said that.
Because the audit is not formally completed.
The legislative audit was released yesterday.
Right.
And it's to my understanding, it's a sample, so they didn't look at everything.
Right.
They found
Not quite
enough
finished,
concerns that they
Mhm.
kicked some over to the AG's office for prosecution, different things like that. But they still said at the end of the day, but this shouldn't affect the general election. And so I go, well, this is again just this area to your point of transparency. And again, I say to checks and balances, wow, we've just lived through serious issues, and at the end of the day, we're sitting here without any meaningful relief. There's no meaningful check and balance on this. This is, again, it's kind of fraudulent. Amendment D text was fraudulent, telling us about what's really going on. It wasn't. These different things are happening, and I say, hey, legislature, I do want to fix things. I do want to get the balance right. So let's just get it right. You want power from me? I agree, you should have it to an extent. With, like you say, we do need this protection for some initiatives. There's just some things they refuse to address. And in case you're curious, I did write a very long explanation of a lot of these things. I have a website, austinhepworth.com. You can go there. You can see Amendment D on it. But one of the things I talk about is we can address, I believe, some of the problems with initiatives. We can allow for there to actually be changes along the way. It won't be as robust as a legislative process, but there are systems we have in place we could easily adopt to make it better and improve it. And I do believe we can even potentially restrict this to areas that we can show the government's refusing to address. They won't run our bill. They won't talk about it. We can put some other things in place to, I think, properly balance and keep our system of government strong. Because like you say, when you go up to the legislature, it's concerning at times. Some bills they vote on way too quickly. There's not enough debate. But in general, I'd say that, again, 85% of the time, the process works out to produce something much better. When we amend, when we listen to the voices, when we have public input, things get changed as a result. And ballot initiatives just completely lack that. And there is deep concern. We do need a check and balance on it. But I say, but don't trade that and put this limitation on yourself to not be able to change the general intent. Because, like, again, I look at Medicaid and I go, how would Medicaid fare in court if they chop that out with the restriction they can't change the general intent? I go,
right, yeah.
That was a half and half thing. That's a close call on that bill. And I'm not comfortable going there. I'm not comfortable with an abortion bill getting through and then there being restrictions on changing the general intent. And I say, this isn't the proper balance. Let's just get back to talking about the proper balance. And again, the Supreme Court decided that for us. We don't have to now. We have the 2 years or whatever it is to try and work this out. But we as a people need to be very proactive on it. And I do think I would encourage you to still vote yes or no on A and D to signal to the legislature where you're at.
Yeah.
To show them we may need to change something, or no, we just love it as is. Let's move forward with it type thing.
And I would absolutely encourage everyone to reach out to your legislators and explain what you like about them and what you don't like about them, because they are going to be rewritten. And so I would encourage you to go on, is it austinhepworth.com?
Yep.
So austinhepworth.com, go in there, because I would advise all of us, and I haven't done it myself, so I am going to give everyone this challenge, including myself, to go on and read your paper. And so that way we can get really educated and find your ideas. And because we do have the opportunity now to work with the legislature and to create a better amendment and to make to improve on it so that it is something that we do feel good about. So austinhepworth.com, go on there and read it. And also that is where you can learn more information about Austin, who is running for the Utah State Attorney General. And I don't think we could do better. You can tell Austin's very brilliant, and he does have extreme experience in court. He actually is an attorney who works as an attorney and has experience prosecuting people and bringing up these issues. And so I think our state would be very blessed by having Austin as our Attorney General.
Yeah,
do you have any parting words that you want to share? Because I do want to get to Marianne. Thank you so much for being with us, Austin.
For sure. No, thanks for having me. And again, I actually believe very strongly that we as a people can do things. I think if you look at the whole Phil Lyman campaign, it's been spurred by people and people sharing, people talking, people doing. There's a great power, and we continue to talk. We continue to do things. Things will change for good. I'm very optimistic about that. So we will have a couple of nervous years, I think. Of still working through some things, but there's good at the other end of it, I believe, and we just need to keep doing our part.
I love your optimism, and I totally agree with you. And I really cannot thank you enough for your excellent work, that you have made such a difference in our state already in participating in that process and helping get some great laws through. And you have my full recommendation. I ask everyone to please vote for Austin Hepworth for Utah AG. Thank you.
Thanks, Dalane.
Thanks so much for being with us. We'll look forward to having you again. Thank you, Austin. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Okay, and we are going to just shift gears, and we're going to bring on Marianne Christensen, who is the executive director of Utah Ledge Watch and has been up at the legislature and been involved for many years, even longer than I have, which it feels like my entire life. But Marianne was there when I first got involved with Eco Forum. But thank you so much for being with us, Marianne, Liberty Mom.
And look at how gray we've gotten, right?
Yes, we have. We have definitely. We've definitely gotten some gray hairs with the stress and lack of sleep and hard work that we've done.
And age.
And age, yes.
It's been a lot of years.
The many years that we have. So, Marianne, tell us, Utah Legislative Watch is an excellent organization. Thank you so much for taking it over and being the head. What are some issues that you are specifically concerned about that you're working on right now?
Well, you've been talking about the governor's signatures.
Yes.
The big problem there is, if there are remedies, what are they?
Mm-hmm.
And could the courts remedy the situation without causing damages that would also need remedying? It's such a complex problem.
It is very complex.
What happened with the legislative audit, which a legislative audit is, a legislator has asked their auditor to go in and audit something. They go in with subpoena power. They really can get the information they need in order to be able to actually do an audit. So Austin mentioned that it was a sample. They sampled 1,000 out of 28,000 signatures.
Right, signatures. The required to get on the ballot. They validated 28,006 or 28,008, I believe.
28,000.
So they certified saying that we had the 28,000. But now they've done this audit and they did a sample, and they're not done. They said they won't be done till the end of the year, but the election's coming up in 2.5 weeks. And so they released this audit of 1,000 sample of 1,000 signatures.
Yeah, they released the results of the first sample.
Right.
They took samples of Governor Cox, Congressman Curtis running for Senate, and Derek Brown, auditor.
AG.
AG, right? So they sampled those 3 races.
Mm-hmm.
And in the governor's race, interestingly enough, there were a whole lot more errors than they found in either Curtis's signatures or in Derek Brown's signatures. That's pretty darn interesting to me.
That is very interesting. Alarming, even I would use the word alarming, but I'm a little tainted, let's be honest. I'll just be honest. Forthcoming. I'm tainted. I'm not surprised. And I do think that it's very important also. 2 things I think are important to note is, one, the same signature gathering company also is under investigation because they found massive fraud in Senator Ibsen's signatures. Now, he gathered signatures and paid this company. They found massive fraud, but he was able to secure the nomination through the caucus system. So it didn't matter that he didn't get enough signatures. It didn't matter for his race, but it's the same company. And that company is under investigation, criminal investigation. And it's the same company. So I'm not surprised.
Same company as Governor Cox. But what legislative audit was reporting on for the most case, and like Austin mentioned, there were some things that were flagged and turned over to the AG's office, yes. But mostly what they found was that the Davis County Clerk's office did a terrible, 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 terrible job of verifying signatures. They found signatures that were verified that should not have been. They found signatures that should have been verified that were not. And the net difference in just a 1,000 vote sample, the net difference was 570 something signatures that Cox was lacking from that, just that 1,000 sample.
Just that one sample.
If it's approximately the same, if there's even 100 signatures, a net 100 signatures that shouldn't have been counted per 1,000, what 28 times 100, even 100?
Deal breaker.
He didn't qualify, not even close. Not even close. Not even close. So it was closer to 600 in that 1,000. We're just talking about it's 2,800. He had an overage of 500 and something, and yes, he had almost a month that he could have continued to gather signatures and continue to turn in signatures if he hadn't relied on Davis County saying, you're verified, you're qualified, you're going to be on the ballot.
But he didn't. And the way the law works, it's not what you could have done, it's what you actually did do.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to spend the money. Who can blame him? Why spend the money? Like, I'm certified, so why continue to spend money to gather more signatures? But he didn't gather more, and he doesn't have more. And now it's too late to turn any more in, because it's the law says you have to turn them in by that date, which was long ago. And now he can't turn any more in or gather anymore.
So
the law.
So if Cox was trusting his signature gathering company and they were committing fraud, then they damaged him. If he was counting on the Davis County clerk to be accurate in qualifying him for the ballot, then they damaged him. So Governor Cox has now been legally damaged in two different ways.
Absolutely. And part of the
problem, just because he's been damaged in two different ways from two different entities does not make him a qualified candidate.
Does not. And I think it's also important to note the lieutenant governor, whose only responsibility is elections. She is the one who forced other counties to use Davis County to verify their signatures. They were not allowed to do it themselves because Davis County has a machine. They used AI, which is why there are so much fraud. There are so many incorrect certified signatures that should not have been both directions. And again, a violation of the principles of our Constitution, which are decentralization of powers. Each county is supposed to, and that's why elections, when each county does their own elections, that's why we don't want them centralized, because it's harder when they're decentralized. It's harder to cheat. It's easier to verify. You can't cheat big. You can only cheat small. And each county verifies their own signatures. Then you have the county certifying it. And here where we had Davis County certifying almost all the signatures across the state, you just take one county screws up and it messes up the entire state. Where if each county would have done what their stewardship is and what our Constitution requires, and again, the lieutenant governor who's on the ballot, who is also has a conflict of interest and who's also damaged, but also forced the damage to happen. She caused the damage by, I mean, they both caused the damage by going around the caucus system by using the signature. They chose the risk of being damaged. They chose the company, which they chose of their own free choice, that they maybe, they chose that company that did damage them. And then Deidre caused the damage of Davis County because she forced everyone to use that county. I'm just saying that she's also accountable for the damage caused.
Yes, she definitely is. And By the way, one thing Utah Legislative Watch is working on this year for this coming session is a bill to make it so that all signatures for initiatives, referenda, or candidate petitions have to be counted in their respective counties. So,
and they need to be transparent too. If you sign a signature on a ballot, if you want to go register to vote and you want to keep that private, 100% respect that, 100%, 1000%. But once you sign a signature for someone to be on the ballot, or you sign an initiative, you have given up your right to privacy of that. You're saying, I support this. I am supporting them openly. And there has to be transparency there. I need to see if my signature is on there.
When you are taking on the responsibility of placing something before the other voters,
yes,
the other voters should be able to verify that was done correctly.
Absolutely.
No, in the signatures. And that bill is going to be coming out this session too. I don't see any problem with passing that with all of the hoopla over this.
Right.
But Representative Lisenby, if she doesn't carry it herself, she will be making sure there's a good sponsor for that one.
Wonderful.
So we know that is going to happen. And that
is something that we all as citizens, we need to be very vocal. We need to get engaged. We need to be very proactive on that, because if our vote doesn't count, we have no freedom anywhere else. This is absolutely essential. Our votes we need to have transparent and honest elections. We can't secure any other liberties without elections. So we need everyone, all hands on deck on this. Thank you very much.
And just to give you an idea of how legislation comes about, going back to having the counties count each of their own petitions. Well, what are own petitions? Because one petition can have signers on it from multiple counties. So you can't trade petitions back and forth. So we're going to design the bill so that whoever, each petition gatherer signs out packets, and where the petition gatherer lives, they turn into their own county. So then the next question was, well, it's a statewide race, and candidates in a statewide race shouldn't have to go around to 29 counties in order to verify signatures. So how are we going to do a centralized place where they can verify? Well, that should be the LG's office, but we don't want to just send the signatures to the LG's office because we've already had a problem with the LG's office.
Exactly.
So we've decided that the bill will say the signatures stay in the county, but they send digital scans to the LG, so that candidates can go to the LG to see the digital scans that have come in from the counties. If they have any questions about results from counties, then they can go to that individual county to see actual signatures. So I think we have it all worked out, but every single question is a complex one.
It
and
is.
We can't solve our problems with very simple answers. Every idea causes this little wrinkle here and that little wrinkle over there, and it all has to be worked out. But there are some exciting things happening, and there are some things we absolutely are going to get out of this legislative session that are going to help us get control of our elections again. Now, everyone who's close enough, who pays enough attention to elections, not just average voter, but people who pay attention to what's going on in elections, we all know how damaging SB 54, the signature path to the ballot, which completely bypasses everyone who participates in their party by caucus, everyone who
bypasses elected representatives. Delegates are elected representatives, and it bypasses the republic. It shoots the republic in the face, because now you no longer need to answer to or be held accountable by your elected net representatives, the delegates. And
in those delegates are accountable to everyone who elected them. And every single registered voter in the state is assigned to a precinct, can elect their delegates, can send their delegates, can ask their delegates to report back. And the
any party that they want to, or no party at all.
And the delegates go out and do the work of deciding what candidates will be the best. And they put in a lot of time going to meet and greets and talking to candidates on the phone and going to their town halls and asking them questions and finding out exactly, are they best for the state of Utah, yes or no? Governor Cox did not go to one meet and greet.
And I actually I held several meet and greets, and I invited him, and he refused to even answer, but he refused to attend any meet and greet. So he did not go to one. He did not face the delegates under any circumstances.
Except when he came to the convention.
Right.
And completely denigrated the delegates and their service. So he does the signature path. He goes straight to the primary ballot. Really, people do not know anything about him. They do not know what his record has been these past 4 years. They don't realize how he has taken boatloads and boatloads of money printed on the government printing press.
Right.
For COVID or COVID relief or whatever. People don't realize how that money was funneled into companies that benefited him and his cronies. They don't know that he's driving us into 15-minute cities and surveillance and all kinds of stuff that Utahns really don't go along with. But it's hard to inform the voters when in the middle of a primary campaign. It's hard to have the money to buy the sound bites.
The resources.
Yeah.
The bandwidth.
That's why the convention is so important. So those of us in the know, we would love to. It's our end goal of getting rid of SB 54. And things are coming around to that. But in the meantime, we need to pick the low-hanging fruit, and we need to do everything that we can to interrupt the functioning of SB 54. If it gets too hard of a path for candidates to take, then maybe they won't. Maybe they will.
Exactly right. We can make it very difficult.
So here are things that I expect out of this next session. I expect a constitutional amendment creating the office of Secretary of State.
I do too.
And people are like, well, except then eventually the Secretary of State's going to be counting their own votes. So I actually suggested, why don't we make it a 6-year term and they can only run for 1 term? So then they're never counting their own votes. And so I think that's what we will end up with.
That's a good solution, because I was thinking about having the lieutenant governor over the race just for the Secretary of State, but that makes sense because they wouldn't be over their own race if they can only run once and then they run for 6 years. That's I like that, Marianne. I hadn't thought of that. I really like that solution.
Then someone else can be the Secretary of State for 6 years. And if they want to run again, they can run again after a 6-year break so that they're never actually over their own. It
just can't be more than 6 years consecutive, but they can run again in 6 years for the next time.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it a lot. And that really will improve our election system.
Yes, a lot. It'll be
life-changing for that purpose. That is the purpose you elect them, because we don't really elect our lieutenant governor. They get kind of hooked in to the governor, but we should elect someone to be over election, someone who we feel has honor and integrity and that we trust.
Because right now we have a non-elected person doing it. She's not really appointed. She's not really she's just she goes along for the ride.
Handpicked by the governor.
Yeah. So I expect that we will get that this year.
Yes.
I think we have to wait 2 years for it to actually be voted on, because you can't put constitutional amendments on municipal election ballots, which off years are municipal.
We have to do it on the even year. It'll be 26.
I think.
Do we have a sponsor for that? Have you talked to any senators? I have not.
There are a lot of people talking about that. I think that's I think that's something that Speaker Mike Schultz will make sure.
I know Mike Schultz is all over this.
So we definitely will have the no hidden signatures on ballot petitions, which we've already talked about.
Right. Yes.
That will pass. It's the time for that. I don't even think the Senate after this fiasco this year, I don't even think the Senate can shoot it down.
And we're getting some good senators too. We're getting some new senators, which I'm very excited about because we
still have some power mongers in there that still done things. Representative Lisenby has committed to getting Utah out of ERIC. And,
wow, serious.
And to adopting fractal technology.
Okay, people need to know ERIC. We need to tell people what ERIC is because most people aren't going to know what that is, but it's the
ERIC is the government, the swampy way to use this program to clean up voter rolls.
It's a program that is used nationwide by a lot of states, not like every state, but a lot of states use it. And it's a program sold as to clean up our voter rolls, but it is really got some serious problems. And there's a lot of county auditors really like it, but those who have been open and willing to do the research would agree there are some serious problems with ERIC and we need to get it.
The second part of that bill will be adopting fractal technology to clean up our voter rolls.
Excellent.
And I think on an annual basis or maybe a biannual basis, along with the major elections every 2 years, we will at least that often. We talked about decentralizing signature verification, no more Davis County's incompetence or corruption. No one's been able to prove any corruption. So let's
we don't say it's corrupt until we have evidence, but we're just saying there's some serious problems with that. Very serious.
I think we should go for, and there are people talking about it, and actually Speaker Schultz is talking about disallowing mail-in ballots. I think they're going to keep mailing the ballots to you.
Yes, right.
When you get,
which has some real advantages, Marianne. That is nice to get your ballot in advance because it does promote vetting. Because sometimes you're like, a lot of people like, I didn't even know there were 4 constitutional amendments, and then they're calling like, oh my goodness. So it gives.
I didn't know there were 7 candidates for United States.
Yes. So it gives them time, but we should never be mailing them back because now there's no stewardship. There's no line of custody. Now we're giving it into the hands of the Postal Service or just drop boxes where no one's overseeing it. Yeah. We've totally lost our chain of custody.
So I have heard that this is Speaker Schultz. This is one of his priorities. So that's a really good thing.
That is a great thing.
The way that it would happen was that you would get your ballot by mail, but then you would have to take it in and show your ID when you turn it in.
That's fantastic.
We don't have to do the bajillions of signature verifications, and we don't have to do all the ballot curing when signatures don't match, and all of that has made elections so lengthy and so costly.
And that would remove that cost. You just take it in. Here's my ID. Like, what could possibly be wrong with that? Love it. That's fantastic.
And I think they will still keep the early voting with that so that you can go when it's convenient to you. And they should expand the number of locations that you can go to in order to be able to do that. And as part of that, they will make allowances for people who need some kind of absentee ballot.
Sure.
They're confined to a nursing home. They're in the military.
We've always done that, and we always should.
Yes. So those are, I would also love to go for prohibiting out-of-state signature gatherers from coming in. That's just a way to make SB 54 a little more, I don't know.
I'd like to get rid of being able to pay for them. I think you should have to have volunteers. You can't hire a company.
I'd love that too, but courts have already ruled that that's a First Amendment thing.
It's a First Amendment right. Yeah, it's like, I get that. I just don't like it, but I appreciate it. So
those are the things I'm looking forward to. And I think all of those things are low-hanging fruit. I think SB 54, because of those powerhouse senators, and we lost one. Senator Bramble was one. He did not run again, so there's one down. But we still have 3 more tyrants in the Senate. and not even
At
President
least. At
Adams
least. Yeah.
can really stand up to them. So
we've got some work to do, but we are making progress. Thank you so much for being with us, Marianne. I am so thrilled. This is very exciting, and there is hope. And I just think we just need to remember that we need to restore the moral foundation of our culture. We need to get involved. We need to do our part. God cannot help us if we're not willing to step in the trenches and do our part. And if everyone who loves liberty is willing to get involved, we can really take our liberty back and take our state back. And Marianne, thank you so much for being a Liberty mom. Thank you for all the great work you do. I love working with you at the Capitol, and I'm very excited to work with you on these bills. Thank you so much for leading the charge on them. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Have a great day. And remember, you are the guardian of your liberty. Thank you. Thanks for being with us.